All right, so before we begin, I would just like to state for the record that today is August 3rd, 2021, and my name is Ben Bauman. I'm here in Indianapolis, Indiana, and I'm speaking via phone with Mendle Adams, who is in Lyndhurst, Ohio, and we are doing an interview for the Indiana Legislative Oral History Initiative. So just starting off, when and where were you born?
I was born in Bath County, Virginia, on July 1st, 1938.
Oh, okay. And what were your parents' names?
My father's name was Earl Adams, no middle initial or name. My mother's name was Martha Marguerite Godsey, and her mother didn't know how to spell Marguerite, so she wrote Margaret on her school papers, so mother went by Margaret M. Adams.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
All right.
And where was your family from before Indiana?
Well, my great-grandparents were from Pendleton County, Kentucky.
Okay.
And following the Civil War and the, right around the time of the First World War, they began to move into Indiana.
Oh, okay. Interesting. And what were your parents' occupations?
My father was a tool and die maker, and my mother was, as she called it, a household engineer.
Okay, cool. All right. Did you have any siblings?
Yes, I have a older brother, and which is Jim. I have an older sister named Marlene, and I have a younger sister named Frederica.
Oh, okay. Cool. All right. And how would you describe your childhood?
I had a good childhood. I was raised primarily in a rural area around Boston, Indiana, and then later over in the Fairview section of Richmond, and I had a good childhood.
Yeah, okay. Who would you say were the most influential people in your childhood?
Aside from my parents,
Yeah.
Probably my mother's parents.
Okay. What understanding, if any, did you have about your family's political beliefs as a child?
Oh, well, that was an interesting situation. Both my grandparents on both sides were Democrats.
Okay.
And but my father, during the first term of Franklin Delano Roosevelt, changed from being a Democrat to being a Republican.
Oh, wow.
And so that caused some interesting things because my mother was a dyed-in-the-wool Democrat and Dad was a turncoat Republican. So that's what I remember.
That's interesting. So did you ever hear your parents, like, debating politics?
Mother didn't debate too many times. She would often say, however, I canceled out your vote.
Oh, okay. That's funny.
An interesting thing happened. My father, during my high school years, Dad had a tool and die shop in a Richmond area, in a little area called Happy Hollow. which was very poor white folk and black folk that lived in this community on Bridge Avenue. It was called Bridge because they had a covered bridge in the heart of Richmond, right down along the river. And Dad had built this little shop down there, and then he got some jobs with the Department of Defense, and the only telephone that was available down in Happy Hollow was an 8-party line.
Wow.
And Dad said, I need to have a private phone. And they said, we can't have a private phone down there because we don't have the lines. Well, Dad had discovered that the General Telephone was the telephone company there, and that the city owned the electric company, and the city had the poles for the electric company poles down there. But Dad found out somehow or other that the telephone company had been putting their wires up on the city's telephone poles and not paying anything for it. So Dad said, all right, I'm going to run for city council, and when I get there, you're going to have to pay rent on all the times that you use the city's poles. So guess what? They put in a private line for my dad the same day that he filed for city council. He didn't win, but he got their attention. Now, what was interesting about that is that when he announced to the family in the evening meal that he had filed for the Republican primary for city council, his own mother, who lived with us, says, Earl, honey, I'm sorry, I can't vote for you. You're in the wrong party.
Okay. Wow.
So I was taking it pretty seriously.
Yeah, that's funny. Jeez. What schools did you attend growing up?
I attended, we moved around a lot. I attended kindergarten at the old East Haven school, and then we lived on Northwest 17th Street then. Dad had built a new home there. Then we moved from there to the not Star. We moved there to, it was a Star school, elementary school. So I went there for the first, second, and third grade. Then we moved to Boston, Indiana, and I went there through the 6th grade. Then we moved back to the Fairview area, and I went to Dennis Junior High School. And then I went to, I graduated from Richmond High School. However, during the the freshman, sophomore, and junior year of high school, the folks sent me to a fundamentalist Christian school in Frankfort, Indiana.
Okay. So how would you describe your educational experiences then?
I was up to the point that I was very disappointed in my high school at that fundamentalist school, and I announced to my parents that if they made me go back for the 4th year, I would run away from home. And so they let me come back and graduate with my class at Richmond. I felt that my education at Richmond was very good. I felt that my education at the Frankfurt was very poor.
Okay.
And but it did prod me into being a vociferous reader. And what I did, I resisted the kind of what I would term now right-wing kinds of stuff that I was getting from from the people there at the school.
Okay.
I resisted that, and I kind of went down a rabbit hole of studying more appropriate kinds of reading
Sure.
to get me out of that trap. So
Yeah, okay. So, did you have any favorite subjects in schools?
history,
History, okay.
yeah.
Were you involved in any extracurricular activities?
Not through the school. No,
Okay.
I did some. I'm trying to reflect back. I did join a debate team.
Okay.
I did some debate.
All right. Interesting. So, as a child, what were your views of the state of Indiana or about being an Indiana resident?
Oh, some of my fondest memories are, it would seem kind of silly now, but would be if we would go traveling somewhere and we'd come back, or whenever we'd come to drive into the state, we'd always start singing "Back Home Again" in Indiana. So there was some, so that was kind of almost a nationalism kind of thing.
Yeah, sure. Where did you attend college?
I started out after marriage. I started out going to that Bible school there at Frankfurt,
Okay.
and went there for a year, and then 3 years later, I started going to what was then called Marion College, which in Marion, Indiana, is now Indiana Wesleyan University.
Mm-hmm.
And I graduated from there in '67.
Oh, okay. And what was your major?
I had three majors. I had history, philosophy, and religion.
Oh, okay. Very interesting. And you mentioned that you had already been married before you went to college?
Yes.
Okay. So how old were you then? You must have been fairly young, I guess.
I was, I'm trying to think back here. Yes, I had my family very young.
Yeah.
And I think it was in 1960 when it was 1963 when I went back to college. And I consider the work that I did at Marion to actually be my college experience. I don't consider the Bible school much of an academic thing, and I was very young then, but I was in 1963. I would have been about 25 then, I guess.
Okay. Yeah. Interesting. All right. And so after you graduated from college, what did you hope to do?
I was into ministry.
Okay.
And I went on to seminary, just directly out of college into seminary.
Oh, okay. And so how did you view your college experiences overall?
Life-saving.
Life-saving, okay.
Yeah.
Why do you say that?
Well, it opened up the world to me, and helped me. It affirmed that I had a brain.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. So I guess kind of made you feel like you could do more than maybe you thought before or something.
Yes.
In what ways did your awareness of politics change as you went into college and then graduated from college?
Mm-hmm. Well, I was under the influence of my father, who was a very strong person. When it came to politics, I was very much under his influence until I got. Well, I'm trying to think here. Until John Kennedy came on board, and during the John Kennedy campaign, I was caught up in the Republican nonsense, Norman Vincent Peale,
Okay.
and so forth, against Kennedy primarily because he's Catholic.
Yeah.
And then even before the president was shot, I came around to realize that he was speaking more to what I believed to be appropriate, and so I became a Democrat during that administration, and it really came into the fore during the Goldwater and LBJ thing, because I read Goldwater's. Well, they claimed it was his book. It was written by Philip Schlafly on the conscience of a conservative. I read that book to find out what they believed, and it taught me very definitely I'm not a conservative.
Okay. Yeah, fair
and
enough.
There was no turning back.
So, did your political development kind of clash then with your dad at some point?
Very definitely so, yes.
Okay. And how did that affect your relationship?
That lasted for years and years and years and years. Yeah.
How did that affect your relationship with him?
It strained it very, very much so.
Okay, sure.
However, he died in good grace.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So it did not poison our relationship to the point where we no longer had affection for one another.
Right. Yeah.
I honor my father's memory and realized he was a flawed human being, as we all are.
Sure. Okay. So thinking about,
I'm just glad that he wasn't alive to know anything about Donald Trump.
Okay.
Oh, God have mercy.
So thinking about your time in the seminary,
Yeah.
What were your career aspirations from that point?
I was just preparing for the ministry.
Okay, so that was just your plan then?
Yes.
Okay. And so,
I graduated from the seminary. I got my master's in '69.
Oh, okay, cool. All right.
And that was Christian Theological Seminary in Indianapolis.
Got it. Okay. And so you were already married. How many kids did you end up having?
4.
4. Okay. Got it. And how much did your family affect your career, would you say?
Oh, my family, you mean my children, affect my career?
Yeah, your children, your wife, yeah.
Well, bless their hearts, they paid a price
Yeah.
for Daddy's obsession. My wife, Naomi Ruth,
Mm-hmm.
was Had she lived 3 more days, we would have been married 57 years.
Oh, okay.
So we grew up together.
Yeah.
And she was a very, very strong feminist.
Mm-hmm.
And headed up the Equal Rights Amendment campaign in Indiana.
Oh, wow. Okay.
She worked with Alan Alda, Betty Ford were the two people that she worked with that helped her put that campaign together, which was the last campaign to be successful for the ERA.
Right.
That time around. I say that, and I'm hoping that the Supreme Court will rule that those states that ratified recently can be counted. I'm not sure I can count on the Supreme Court to do that, though.
Yeah.
But Ruth definitely helped me to understand a broader understanding of politics and particularly on women's issues.
Yeah, okay. That's cool. All right. And so, how did you become more seriously involved in politics in the first place?
Well, I had, upon graduation from seminary, my wife's parents became, he had not Alzheimer's, he had Parkinson's disease.
Yeah.
And they became dependent upon me. So I had 4 kids and 4 adults. And my salary by that time had gotten up all to the exorbitant amount of $6,800 a year.
Oh my gosh.
And so I had to find secular work in order to support my family. So I went into the insurance business.
Okay, yeah.
And as part of the insurance business in Indianapolis, on the day of the Kent State killings, on that very day,
yeah,
I got a phone call from a clergy friend of mine back in Marion, Indiana, at the Methodist Church, the First Methodist Church, and he asked me to come on staff at the First Methodist Church in a part-time position as a minister with youth. That's the way they named it, lay minister with youth. So I was able to have my insurance office and still work with the kids. Well, that was during the time of the Vietnam War resistance. That was, there was just a whole bunch of stuff going on. Civil rights, women's rights, start of environmental Earth Day kinds of stuff. And so I was just like a hog in slop. I really enjoyed that. And so we moved back to Marion, and my wife and I ran the insurance agency, a little agency we had that kept bread and butter on the table. And we got involved in that. And then there was an opening for city council to fill out the slate of candidates for the Democratic Party, and they couldn't find anybody that was full enough to run in this sacrifice area where we happen to live. And so the county chair had 2 of us young guys that were into this anti-Vietnam War kind of struggle.
Yeah.
And he was talking to one of us of running for that seat. It was a Republican stronghold, and we actually flipped a coin to see who would run, and I lost.
Okay.
But Andy, when he went home and told his wife that he had won and therefore he was going to run, she said she would divorce him if he did. So he didn't run, and he told me, and I went right down to the courthouse and filed. before
Wow.
anyone changed their mind. And so I ran for city council. I did not win, but by that time I had the bug really bad.
Okay.
And so that was in 1970. And so 1972 rolled around, and my wife convinced me that I should run for state legislature so I could vote for the Equal Rights Amendment.
Okay.
And so that's what I did. And I did not win. That 72 was a bad year for Democrats in Indiana. Almost every year is a bad year for Democrats in Indiana, but 72 much more so. And so I was asked by the McGovern campaign to be kind of a surrogate for him, and I went around and gave speeches.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Well, he couldn't be there. I ran around in our area and gave speeches for the McGovern campaign. And I did not win that one, but by the time that Watergate came to fruition, the Republicans stayed home, and so I was able to get elected in 74.
Wow.
So the person that I owe my political career in the state legislature is Richard Milhouse Nixon.
Yeah. I've heard that, several times now. Oh my gosh. Yeah. That seems like it was that era, which was kind of like the glory days for Democrats in Indiana. Because
it was a heady time. It
Yeah.
really was. And I was on the Ways and Means Committee.
Mm-hmm.
I was on the Health and Labor Committee. They started a new committee on the aging, and I was on that. Matter of fact, I chaired that committee.
Yeah.
And so, there were a lot of exciting things that were happening. I say I learned more in my 2 years in the state legislature than I did in all my years in graduate school.
Yeah.
And since then, I've had the pleasure. I took classes in business at Aquinas College in Grand Rapids, Michigan. I took some classes up there, and I took classes at Harvard School of Public Health. I took some classes there as well. So I, when I say more than all my work in graduate school, I really mean that.
Yeah, sure.
So I got my doctorate from a seminary in Indianapolis called Temple.
Oh, okay.
It's not in Indianapolis, it's in Cincinnati.
Oh, okay, got it. So, what did your campaign emphasize when you were running?
My winning campaign.
Yes.
Okay. I took on that was during the time of the Ford administration's recession.
Okay.
And so it meant that there were all kinds of economic issues that had to do with, and then the management and labor kind of thing were pretty sharply drawn there in Marion with the Fisher Body plant, the RCA plant. So you had the IBEW and you had the UAW, and I worked very closely with them and formed a coalition of several of those groups, and had them to. I formed a labor committee, and so it was primarily labor and the women's rights groups that pushed my campaign. And so I aligned myself with what we call now the progressive side of those issues.
Oh, okay. Interesting. And did you have any national political heroes at the time? Or state?
Oh, Bobby Kennedy.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I can't stand his son now, but
Yeah.
Bobby Kennedy was a hero. To a lesser degree, I think Gene McCarthy.
Oh, okay.
It was more difficult for me to identify with him. Yeah, that's pretty much it. McGovern, loved McGovern.
Yeah, okay.
Felt very strongly, in support of that.
And do you remember who your main opponent was?
My opponent for the legislative seat that I saw was the 25th district. That was That was a 2-member district. There were 2 legislators from the same district there.
Yeah.
And that was very peculiar. And the 2 people that served in there prior to my winning was Mac Love and Janice Crimmins.
Okay.
And Mac was a farmer from around Fairmount, Indiana, and Janice was, I don't know what her role was. Her father had been a mover and shaker in the Republican circles, and she had worked as an intern for a United States congressman, and I'm trying to think who it was. I think his name was Murphy, and she had served on his staff in Washington, D.C. before coming back and running.
Okay.
But she had publicly said, when she was questioned about why she had voted against the Equal Rights Amendment, she had said because her father told her to.
Wow.
Well, you can imagine how the women felt about that.
Yeah, I'm sure that wasn't popular, yeah.
So it was, that was an easy picking.
Yeah.
And so anyhow, those were the 2, and Mike Bosball and I were both candidates for the 25th district.
Oh, okay.
Although Mike and I didn't get along very well.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Well,
and then
yeah.
And then I ran after serving 2 years in the House. I was easily convinced that I should run for the Senate.
Okay.
And part of that is because I talked to Birch Bayh, and Birch had wanted me to run for Congress, and we decided that it was not a good idea for me to go just from the House of Representatives to a congressional thing, that I should go for the Senate first, and then that'd give me 2 bites at the apple before I had to run again. And so I ran for the Senate. And so the person that I ran against there was Roger Jessup,
okay.
who was in the Senate seat. And Roger was a teacher, in junior high school teacher, but he had alienated himself from the teachers union because even though he was a teacher, he voted against teachers' rights. And so I exploited that as much as I could.
Yeah. Okay.
But he beat me anyway.
Yeah.
Damn him. It's the best thing that ever happened to me.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So, when you were first elected for the Indiana General Assembly, on that election day that you found out that you had won, how did you feel?
Overwhelmed.
Yeah.
I wrote a thing in my journal that I just read a couple months ago, in which it basically was saying, "Okay, I worked so hard to get here. Now what?
Yeah.
Now what do I do?
Yeah.
I hardly knew, knew my way around. I didn't know my way around at the State House. I had no idea what I was doing.
Yeah.
So I was overwhelmed."
What were you thinking when you walked into the State House for your first day in office?
Oh, I thought that's what you meant. That's when
Well, either way, yeah.
That's when I felt overwhelmed.
Same response, probably. Anyway, yeah.
Yeah.
So, what were your expectations for the legislative process? Were they kind of what you expected, or?
Yes. I was very impressed. I was impressed with the way. Of course, at that time we were all part-time legislators.
Yeah.
But I was impressed with the intensity of the persons that had run for office, and that they had some sense of why they were there and what they were about.
Okay.
And I was impressed on both those that I agreed with politically and those I did not agree with politically. On that standpoint,
interesting.
I felt that most of them were honorable people that were there out of a sense of patriotism.
Yeah. That's good. Okay. Was there a bit of a learning curve for you when you were trying to learn the ins and outs of state politics?
There was a sense in which, I was only there for 2 years, so
yeah,
probably if I'd have been there 20 years, it'd be different.
Yeah.
But, I'm a fast learner, and I was fortunate I was able to get some college kids to come in and help me with doing just some of the nitpicking the paperwork and all that kind of stuff. I would get, they came in and volunteered got some college credits in order to work with me, and that worked out well. As a matter of fact, I had not too long ago on Facebook a young lady that had been an aide for me is now retired from having taught at Bloomington at the IU, and she wrote me a thing thanking me for helping her to get her feet wet on the political thing.
Yeah. Wow. Okay.
That was nice.
Yeah, that's cool.
And that was Mary Ann Carter.
Okay. So, when you were in the General Assembly, did you have any sort of political mentors there that were kind of helping you out, or?
Dick Bodine was a good help to me.
Okay.
To help me to understand things, I think he was probably the best for doing that.
Yeah. How did you communicate with your constituents?
We published a newsletter.
Oh, okay. That works.
We put out a newsletter called Plain Speaking.
Okay. Kind of breaking down everything going on, I guess, yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
And I held, that was a very compact district, and so I held, during the sessions, I would hold weekly meetings town hall kinds of format at the public library and invite the press and the people to come in and, all no holds barred, and, we could discuss things together.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay. Do you remember the first bill that you sponsored?
I don't remember that.
Okay. That's.
I did. There was one bill in particular that I helped to derail, and when you and I were talking initially on this, I told you there were some things that I was proud of and some things I'm not so proud of, and the one thing that I'm not so proud of that I reflect on now is I told you about the recession and how that had hit the Grant County area in particular. At one point in time, we had, they told me the statistics, they seem outrageous now, but they said that there were like 20 to 25% unemployment.
Oh, wow.
And so that hit bang. Okay, it was like a depression there.
Yeah, yikes.
And one of the big employers in the area was the glass bottle industry, and one of the unions was the glass bottle blowers. And there was a bill that had come out by the Isaac Walton League and others to try to do away with glass bottles by placing a tax on them. And so the union came to me and asked me to take that fight on. And so even though I'm a well-qualified liberal and an environmentalist in many ways, yet because of the situation, I was sold on the idea that this would really hurt my constituents, who were employed in the glass bottle industry. So I took it on, and was successful in derailing that legislation. And the Chamber of Commerce and the AFL-CIO glass bottle blowers were on one side, and the UAW and environmentalists were on the other side, and I cast my lot with the glass bottle blowers. And so I justified that based upon that. Now, as I reflect back on that, I will look at it and say, well, there probably could have been some compromises that could have been made on that and so forth, but I was not sophisticated enough to know how to do that. And I was just they kind of dragged me along as the token liberal that would join with them on that. So I look back on that and I have real mixed emotions. But there were some good things that I was one of 5 people that voted to abolish the death penalty in Indiana.
Okay, yeah.
And I have since that time, I just recently resigned from the board of directors of Ohioans to Stop Executions, and as my role of a pastor, have been mentor to people on death row, and went into as a witness to 2 men that were executed, and so that's been a passion for my life. My daughter, my youngest child, is a lawyer who has worked for the last 25 years in the whole area of representing people on appeals for capital punishment.
Oh, wow. Okay. Interesting.
So,
yeah.
That, I say, well, okay, I started in 1975.
Yeah.
So I feel really good about that, and the whole thing was anybody come to me and say, Mendle, can you help us on a bill, I tended to look at it, and then if there was any way I could join with them on it, I did. One of the things we did also was we rewrote the bill, the law that had to do with I want to say that like the punishment of children in school, like doing away with spanking and so forth, and we did the new legislation on child abuse.
Oh, okay.
And the time before that it had been that anybody had looked at it was in 1905 or 1906. So while I was there, we rewrote that legislation, and I was very instrumental in helping to get that done, and we got it done.
Oh, okay, interesting.
So I felt good about that.
Yeah. Wow.
I got a letter from the bishop of the Methodist Church. Now I'm Methodist, right?
Yeah.
At that time, I'm not now, but I was then. And so I got a letter telling me he wanted me to come out and vote against parimutuel gambling. And so I wrote him a letter back, and I said, I don't find anywhere in the Sermon on the Mount or in the Decalogue that says anything about gambling, but I do see some things that have to do about protecting children and the widows and the orphans. And I think you ought to throw the weight of your influence on us when we're trying to upgrade the child abuse legislation. By golly, he came and testified on our behalf.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
Yes.
That's cool.
He did. So anyhow, that was kind of, I enjoyed that. So there were a few things like that happened that I can look back on, take some pride in.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. And the work that I did in the with the aging, we passed the bills that were to set up the Council on Aging and all those things that went on to do Meals on Wheels and all that kind of stuff. We worked with the AARP and NARFI and a couple other groups like that to get those things going, and I worked on that.
Yeah, okay.
There was one other bill here too that I'm wandering. I'm sorry.
No, this is good. That's great.
One other bill that caused a great deal of consternation to me, and I spent a lot of work on, was the bill to set up a system for malpractice medical insurance for the state of Indiana.
Oh, okay.
And during that time, our governor was an MD, Otis Bowen,
right,
MD, and so the American Medical Association had kind of chosen Indiana to be the one that they were going to work on doing away with the ability to people to sue their doctors for malpractice.
Mm-hmm.
And so they came in with, the dog and pony shows from all over the United States to push that through. And it had to come through the committee that I was on, which was the Committee on Labor and Economics. And so I was a chair of that, but I was on the committee. And they pretty well had everybody on the committee lined up, both Republican and Democrat, to push that through. And I dug my heels in and said no. And, oh, Lordy, have mercy. So we went round and round and round and round and round on that one, and it was I think the number was House Bill 1040, which I thought was kind of interesting, that like the tax form.
Yeah.
So that went through several things, and I held a hearing at Ball State Medical School and all that kind of stuff.
Wow.
Yeah. So anyhow, we tried to tone it down. We changed it a lot. Initially, it was just kind of to give the doctors exemption from being sued for medical malpractice, and the UAW at that time was very much in support of the position that I took, and but the AFL-CIO was not, and of course the Chamber of Comics, they were not. So it was an interesting situation.
Yeah, sounds like it. Well, sounds like you were involved with lots of different pieces of legislation and different sort of political debates. Yeah.
So I dug my heels in.
Yeah.
I also was appointed by the Speaker of the House. I was appointed to the initial Waste Management Commission for the state of Indiana.
Okay.
Which was for us to do away with the open dumps and put in place a series of I forget what they call them now. Anyhow, waste management tanks where they buried the dump,
Yeah.
and I tied it in with the whole environmental stuff that I was interested in.
So thinking about some of the interactions in the General Assembly during your time, what was the relationship like between Democrats and Republicans?
In the legislature?
Yes.
There definitely was a difference between where the two parties stood on some basic issues, but you didn't find the kind of toxic kinds of stuff that I've observed since then. I don't know how to express that. I mean, we had difference of opinion, for instance, about the Equal Rights Amendment, about the environment, about workers' compensation, about, there were just so many of those things. We had those, but, and they could get to heated debates about the issues, but I did not find that kind of mutual destruction attitude amongst the folks. Now, there were a few that did. I remember, this is a fun thing.
Sure.
I remember a bill came before us that had to do with saying that public toilets had to have so many stalls that were free, that you didn't have to pay for them.
Okay.
And the deal was that the women were pointing out that in the men's room you had the stalls for the urinals, but for the women, if they had just the stalls that locked up, then that wasn't fair to them. And so there was a push for us to go to having so many. There was a bill, I forget what the bill number was and so forth, or who even promoted it, but there was a bill that said that so many of the toilet stalls you had to have a balance. So many had to be free, and for you could have some that you had to pay for, but so many had to be free.
Okay.
Well, the Ku Klux Klan decided that they were against this, and so they published a paper and they handed it out to the members of the legislature. And it talked about this, and it called it creeping socialism. And I had this vision in my mind. Now this comes on my desk as I'm preparing for the session.
Yeah.
And there's this flyer that comes from the Ku Klux Klan, which right away caught my eye.
Yeah, of course.
That was talking about creeping the socialism, and I had in my mind's eye this person that didn't have money to pay for the stall that was down on all fours, sneaking underneath the stall, creeping socialism. And I couldn't get that out of my mind, and I started laughing. And I laughed and I laughed till I was almost in tears. And finally the speaker sent a page down and said, ask Representative Adams what in the world he's laughing about.
Oh my God.
And so I wrote out a note and sent it up to the speaker. Well, then he started laughing too. And
wow.
Yeah, so they're just funny, fun stuff like that. And of course, the Klan was also against anything on sickle cell anemia. There was a bill for us to put some funds through the medical school for research into sickle cell anemia.
Yeah.
And they were against it because they saw it as a way to kill off black people. I mean, really. And so,
yeah.
They said, oh, God. So there was that kind of crazy stuff that was done. And the Birch Society hated me with the purple passion.
Okay.
And that was all right because they understood that I was their enemy. And that's true, I was.
Yeah.
And am. So, that was fair game. But I didn't see that kind of rancor that I saw that I've observed now.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make any sense at all?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of sounds like that just today it's a bit more aggressive and personal kind of almost.
Yeah. It may have to do with the professionalization of the political person, because we were all part-time politicians, and we had other ways of making our living and so forth, and it was not our total income.
Yeah. So, I mean, you mentioned the KKK a couple of times trying to get involved with legislation. Were they, commonly popping up when it comes to trying to affect legislation during your time?
Yes. In my district, they prided themselves. They went around to all the bars and told the barkeepers that I was a religious fanatic because I'm a seminary graduate, that I was a religious fanatic and I was going to close all the bars.
Oh, my gosh.
And then they passed a rumor at the barbershops that I was a communist and that I was an atheist and that I was going to close all the churches.
Wow. Okay.
And so I told them that they were right on both counts, that I was an atheist that was going to close down the bars.
Oh my gosh.
It's so silly.
Yeah. That's pretty crazy. Yeah. Wow.
But yeah, there was a significant part of the Democratic Party in Grant County, Indiana, that was controlled by the Ku Klux Klan. And so I had to take on the party establishment to get the nomination.
Wow. That's really crazy.
And then in the Republican Party, the significant part of the Republican Party in Grant County was controlled by the John Birch Society.
Okay.
So it gives you some idea of what was going on. And I almost ran as an independent. I didn't.
Yeah.
But I could not count on the party establishment to support my candidacy. I had to put it all together myself.
Yeah.
Which I did.
Wow.
I even wheedled out a letter from George Meany of the AFL-CIO endorsing me personally for the legislature because the local AFL-CIO would not.
Okay. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Jeez. Yeah, it sounds like a pretty wild time. Yeah.
It was a very wild time. Yes, it was. Yeah. I was fortunate. It was, as the Chinese say, I lived in most interesting of times.
Yeah. Okay. So, what differences were there between the House and Senate?
Oh, the Senate. When I was there, the Senate was the majority in the Senate were Republicans,
Okay.
but the majority in the House were Democrats.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of employee favorable legislation that passed in the House but died in the Senate.
Okay. Yeah. Makes sense.
There was another interesting little tidbit here that you might have some interest in. That was during the time of in the Ford administration where they had the block grants, and they had a program called CETA.
Okay.
And Title 10.
Yeah.
And there were significant blocks of money that were given directly to local projects that didn't have to go through the normal bureaucracy, but they could go directly to them. And Doc Bowen sent one of his people to me. That's Otis Bowen, the governor, sent one of his persons to me and said that he would like to be able to spend some money for the winterization program. That's when they were going to go in and put up VisClean and cover the windows in these shacks. I mean, literally shacks.
Yeah.
And put insulation in their ceilings and that kind of stuff. And they were going to do that for the poor. And he wanted to put some money into it, but the people in the Senate were absolutely against doing anything like that. They didn't want to accept any of that federal money. That was all tainted money.
Yeah.
And so Bowen's person, I'm trying to think of the guy's name. I think it was Don Martin.
Okay.
That was on his staff. And he made a clandestine visit to me one evening and said that the governor would like to do something, but he couldn't do it because his hands were tied. And so we concocted this plan where I would carry enabling legislation through the House, and I would ask for $5 million.
Okay.
The governor wanted to give $2 million. And so I would push that through the House and just raise so much hell on that the governor would tell the people in the Senate that he had to do something to shut this Adams character up. And so that's what we did.
Wow.
And I met together with the caucus. The speaker was not aware of that arrangement. I met together with the caucus and convinced the caucus that what we should do, and that even if they were against us spending the money, that the Republicans would never let it pass, and so they could be on both sides of the issue, you see. And so because of that, we were able to drag some of the more conservative Democrats in on the vote, and we passed it through the House and sent it over to the Senate. And then they compromised it down and said, we've got to do something. And the governor said, you got to do something to those crazy people over there in the House. They're beating me up on this. And so they passed it by. And the only thing I did was, in my county, there was a cost for them to do this. In my county, in Grant County, they had previously had to have a smaller block grant that was for something, and they put it through the county commissioners, which were 3 Republicans, and they hired one of the commissioners' wives. They hired her to run the program and siphoned off all the money to pay her salary and so forth, so they didn't have any money to do what they were supposed to do with it. So I said the only way that I would approve this would be if they would see to it that in my county, the money that came through that block grant would go to this Southern Christian Leadership Conference.
Okay.
Which was black ministers.
Yeah.
And by golly, they bought it. And they did it.
Wow.
So we got the money to winterize homes in our county.
Jeez, that's
And
interesting. Okay.
It was run by Booker T. Jackson.
Yeah.
Pastor of the Missionary Baptist Church.
Wow.
Yeah. So I was able to use a little bit of leverage to do that.
Yes.
Really felt good about it. But I couldn't... I've never told that in any kind of official thing, but it was like, it was a clandestine kind of a thing. Say, okay, how can we make it so that we'll break the logjam so we'll get some of the money to be used for this?
Yeah.
And I was game for it because I like to raise hell.
Yeah. Well, that really does shed light, though, on just the complexity of getting, legislation done.
Yes.
That's
why when I look at what Joe Biden is doing right now,
mm-hmm.
I can say, well, you got to give him a break, I don't see how they're going to pull this off, but if they do, it is marvelous. It really shows some statescraft, and I have a deep appreciation for people who know how to do those things.
Yeah. Well, I guess
just because I had just a little bit, just a taste of it. Not enough to be adept at it, but...
Yeah. Well, I suppose that kind of highlights one of the big misconceptions about government and passing laws, that a lot of the public, I guess, kind of gets the impression that you could just do it instantly.
Yeah.
But...
and it's like, it's like the old expression, they say it's like making sausage.
Yeah. Yeah, pretty much, yeah.
Okay, well... as I said before, I think I learned more in that 2 years than I did in all my graduate work.
Yeah, no, I believe it, yeah.
And I went on, you haven't said anything about that, I don't know the answer to that, but I had 50 years in the pulpit,
mm-hmm.
and I was ecumenical campus chaplain at Oklahoma State University, and that was a marvelous time. I had 50 different religious groups that I had responsibility for keeping them talking to one another on campus. And, and then after I retired from the ministry, I taught in the African American Seminary in Cincinnati. And I've just had a ball.
Yeah. Yeah, sounds like a good time.
Been a good life.
Let's see. So, did you have a pretty good idea of how people were going to vote before they actually voted when you were serving the General Assembly?
Yes, generally so, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, there were always surprises.
Yeah.
There were always people that jumped on one side or the other side that shocked you one way or the other.
Yeah, that makes sense. I suppose it's hard to gauge everyone. There's a lot of people there.
Yeah.
How influential was party leadership, would you say, in sort of dictating what legislation would get passed?
The speaker had awesome power.
Yeah.
And so there were just very few times that anything got past Phil Bainbridge that he didn't have some kind of control of.
Yeah. Okay.
There were a couple times when we blasted a bill out of committee or something over his protest, but not often.
Yeah. Okay.
One of those had to do with rural electrification. The REMC, REMCA had some legislation there, and that was a time when Indiana, Michigan electric company was all embroiled in something. What they were doing there makes they were pikers compared to what First Energy did here in Ohio.
Yeah.
But at that time, it was something that really caused concerns, and rural electrification was trying to be a bulwark against the kinds of encroachments that Indiana, Michigan was doing.
Yeah. Okay. Sure. Do you remember?
And I think Win Moses. I don't know if you've run across that name yet. Win Moses was the guy that was the person that caused great difficulty to Indiana, Michigan.
Oh, okay.
And I got involved in that only because one of the commissioners from the public, whatever it was called, the one that had oversight of the utility companies, had let his guard down in my presence and told us something about what was going on, and I told Win.
That's funny.
Yeah, I had to testify.
Okay.
An affidavit on that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you remember specific incidents where you were working with some Republicans on important pieces of legislation?
Yes. A guy by the name of Lampert, I forget his first name, who was a member of the House from one of the districts there in Indianapolis, and he's Republican. And he had a bill for including aging or age for senior citizens on civil rights.
Okay.
So it had to do with employment. On the person could not be discriminated against because of their age for employment purposes. And that was one of the times when I went on as a co-sponsor with him on this legislation.
Yeah.
And I primarily did that because of my work with the Committee on Aging, and I felt like that it was consistent with with what the rest of my portfolio was. And he asked me to sign on as a co-sponsor, which I did. Well, I was the only Democrat that signed on to that.
Oh, okay.
And so the guy's name, a guy from up around the Chicago area, and one of those that was the head of the AFL-CIO, called me at home and told me that I had to come off of that bill. And smart-ass guy that I was, I argued with him and told him that I thought it was a civil rights issue and that I could no more not sponsor that than I could sponsor something that said you could discriminate against people because they were black.
Wow.
And his argument was, if they want that kind of protection, they need to make it in their contract.
Yeah.
And I said, well, everybody doesn't have a contract.
Right, right.
Everybody's not a member of the union, and this is something that needs to be not just for union people, but needs to be for anybody. Well, he and I did not see eye to eye. It ended up with, I think I paid the political price for.
Yeah. Okay.
But yeah, that happened, but it had to do with Lambert. I forgot about him. He was a real honorable fellow, and what was curious was that when he'd gone for that, because the Chamber of Comics they were against his legislation, so they probably gave him the same kind of grief that the AFL-CIO guy gave me.
Sure.
Thinking that nobody should tell them what to do, you know?
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, but that was one in particular, and then the one for the CETA things that had to do with that became partisan, but it was a sham.
Yeah.
It was really not partisan.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah. Let's see. I think you have some kind of big picture questions now. What would you say the public doesn't know about the Indiana General Assembly and how it operates?
When I was there was always a confusion between the General Assembly and Congress.
Okay. Yeah.
And so you had people like a little Bircher woman from Marion, Indiana, that kept wanting to talk with me about the gold standard, for instance.
Okay.
And I say, well, we don't have anything to do with the gold standard. And trying to explain that.
Yeah.
So there were people that generally don't have any idea of what's going on.
Yeah.
They don't have any idea on how their lives are affected by what happens there at the General Assembly.
Yeah.
And they tend to think in terms of Congress. They may have a better idea of it, but not the General Assembly. And so I think that's it. And I think that they tend to think that we're all lawyers. And of course, I wasn't a lawyer. I was a theologian.
Right. Sure. Yeah.
So, theologian that couldn't make a living being a theologian, so I did something else.
Oh, yeah. What about, what would you say the role of lobbying was when you were serving in the General Assembly?
I saw the lobbyists that I depended on to help me to understand things.
Yeah.
Were like the UAW was very good.
Okay.
And I did not find, they didn't twist my arm to make me vote on something a certain way. The same way with the Indiana State Teachers Association. They were excellent in helping you to pick through and understand what the issues were and to deal with that.
Yeah.
There also was NARFE, the National Association of Federal Employees. They were good on senior citizen stuff. And I found that the Chamber of Commerce and the AFL-CIO tended to be rather heavy-handed, and they tended to, instead of educating you, tended to say, "This is where we are. We expect you to support us." You know, that kind of thing.
Oh, okay.
Not try to educate you on that. I lean very, very heavily on the Legislative Bureau.
Oh, okay.
Very heavily on them, because I could count on them to give me a nonpartisan understanding of what was,
Happening, yeah.
what was at stake.
Yeah. So like legislative services then, I guess, was pretty useful for
Yeah.
you then, yeah. It sounds like then that there were kind of like two sets of lobbyists, some that were trying to just provide you with information while others were trying to, I guess, get you to sign up for a cause.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. What would you say was the most controversial issue during your time in the assembly?
The most controversial was that whole malpractice
Okay.
bill,
Yeah. Makes sense.
because the issues were so high, and you had insurance companies weighing in on that, and you had the hospitals weighing in on it, and the AMA were really weighed in on that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I understand.
I'm trying to think of defense lawyers, not the defense lawyers. I forget which one. One of the bar association. They weighed in on it as too, because they saw it as an affront to to what they believed should be protected.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see. What, in your opinion, would you say is the most important work of the Indiana General Assembly?
Say again, please.
What, in your opinion, would you say is the most important work of the Indiana General Assembly? Work.
Oh, that worked.
Yeah, or like, what's the role of the Indiana General Assembly to you? Like, what's their purpose? What's the purpose of the Indiana General Assembly?
Well, I think it is to try to work within the parameters of what the state constitution and the federal constitution, of which we're pledged daily to uphold, or what those parameters will allow you to do in order to weigh the interest and come up with workable solutions to issues that come up for those who are in conflict. And that's I think that's primarily it.
Okay.
I'm not real satisfied with my answer on that.
How would you summarize your time overall as a state legislator?
I look back on it with a very positive feeling.
All right.
And I feel like it was honorable work, and I feel like that I learned a lot about how legislation is done or how it's not done.
Yeah.
And I think I learned a lot about kind of human nature and how people work together.
Yeah, I suppose you'd get lots of experience dealing with different people in different situations. So.
Yeah. One of the things that I really enjoyed doing was just listening to the debate that was going on and the various areas of the state have various I don't know how to say it, their language, the way they pronounce words and so forth was so different. And you get people from around Boone, the Boone County area, and the people from up around the Chicago area, and they talked they spoke so differently from one another, and I found that just delightful.
Yeah, I'm sure that is interesting.
And I had some I had an aide that was paid for by the caucus. I don't know if you run into him or not. Grant Monahan. Have you run into him?
No, I haven't.
The last I heard from him, he was lobbyist for the Indiana Retail Merchants Association.
Interesting.
But he was my aide in the legislature. Then he had about 5 of us that he worked with.
Okay.
And I had contact with him on Facebook not too long ago. So that was kind of nice.
Yeah, that's cool. That's always nice to keep in touch. Yeah. What lessons did you learn from your time in the General Assembly?
I learned to try to understand what motivates people to take particular stands, and how it is that you find out what really is going on and why they're acting out the way they are.
Yeah.
And it gave me some insights into that, and how it is that we can lock ourselves into positions that we may or we may not be wholehearted on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it makes sense. So, based on your experiences, what advice would you give to future legislators or even current legislators?
I would think that it would be worthwhile to find a mentor that has some integrity and that you could rely on to test out ideas and to be there to advise you on how to pick through the system.
Yeah. Okay. How would you say the state of Indiana has changed over the course of your lifetime?
I think it's taken an abrupt jerk to the right.
Okay.
And I am ashamed many times to when I tell people I served in Indiana's legislature, and then I see them doing such stupid things as the anti-gay kind of legislation that Mike Pence was involved in and all that kind of stuff. It just causes me to be very concerned, very ashamed.
Yeah, so I guess the Indiana General Assembly then appears like it's gone much further towards the conservative side of things.
Yeah, there's a difference between conservative and reactionary.
Okay.
And conservatives, legitimately can look at things and say, well, we want things as they were at a given point in time, and it's based upon certain principles. But you don't find them trying to be hurtful to other people, going out of the way. They may do things that hurt people, but they don't go out of their way with that in mind.
Yeah, okay.
And what I observed, particularly from Indiana's legislature, is that they've just gone overboard in that kind of vindictive attitude. And I have great remorse about that.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. Last couple here. What qualities do you think that Indiana residents still have or hold dear?
What qualities
Yeah.
do I think that Indiana residents hold dear?
Well, yeah, and still have, perhaps, that have like continued.
Not having lived in Indiana for a number of years,
Mm-hmm.
it's a little difficult for me to tell. I can only tell from the standpoint of my family
Yeah, okay.
that is still there. And I have children, I have grandchildren, I have great-grandchildren, I have nieces and nephews and sister that are still Hoosiers.
Yeah.
And I see in them a kind of, they definitely still have a sense of family,
Mm-hmm.
a sense of caring for one another, a kind of ease with nature,
Okay.
where I see some as being very strong environmentalists and so forth. Most not, but most that would be more like what we used to call in the day conservationists. That they had to do with, you want to keep the stream clear so that the fish can thrive in it because you enjoy fishing.
Yeah, okay.
And it has to do with a love of that kind of thing. Not so much of looking at it from the standpoint of a macro sense of what does it mean for the kinds of stuff we're doing to the environment or global warming or any of that kind of stuff. Not so much doctrinaire in that, but more of a sense of just enjoying the woods and enjoying the farming and enjoying nature.
Yeah.
And enjoying being with the family.
Yeah, okay. Sure.
And that sense of not so much of fighting to become multimillionaires, but rather have a comfortable living and being able to take care of business.
Yeah. All right. Last question here. What do you want the people of Indiana to know about their role when it comes to the function of the Indiana General Assembly?
Oh my God. Be constantly on the alert.
Yeah.
And that our constitutional rights, both under the state constitution and the federal constitution, can be very easily lost unless we take them seriously and take what it means to be. We used to have. We had. I don't know if you've run across him. I'm trying to think. Kermit Burris. Have you run across him?
I've heard his name mentioned several times. I haven't actually talked to him.
Okay, Kermit was the minority leader in the House when I was there. So he was the guy that was in charge of all the Republicans.
Yeah.
And I think he's from, if I'm not mistaken, around Logansport. I believe that's where he was from.
Okay.
But Kermit used to keep saying something about that he was there at the behest of the sovereign people of Indiana. It's not like the dingbats have talked about, I'm a sovereign citizen. It had to do with really understanding that what we do, in the final analysis, the bosses are the people that this affects.
Yeah.
And that the sovereignty does not flow from the top down, but from the bottom up.
Right.
And Kermit used to wax eloquently about the sovereign people of Indiana that had placed us there to do the business for the state. And he just right on target. He right. And so I think that is true in every state, and is true nationally.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, that's all the questions I have for you. Is there
one of the things that I didn't tell you is that I've gone on and got my doctorate in theology.
Oh wow! Okay.
And so
congratulations.
And so I've gone well beyond what I started out with that little fundamental school in Indiana.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah.
Published a few books and so forth.
Oh wow! Okay, so you're keeping busy there.
So, anyhow, I thank you very much. I appreciate you taking time to do this, and I think it would be kind of an exciting thing. I would be anxious to know how many of my colleagues are still kicking around.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Take care of yourself. Stay healthy.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.